All right, so one thing that when we make maps that kind of helps them stand out is to emphasize the area that we're planning on mapping. So in this case, I've got a map here that shows state boundaries and then some more specific data about Indiana. And let's say that I want to highlight the state of Indiana in my map. So one way I can do that is to use, say, a state boundary that I've made more bold, right, around my more specific local data. But one thing to note is that the state boundaries for our neighboring states, as wonderful as they are, kind of obscure some of the specialness of Indiana, at least in, say, this map project, which is focusing on Indiana. So we can actually adjust the symbology of the surrounding states to downplay their importance, not because they're not great places, but because they are not the focus of this map. So what I'm going to do here is open up the symbology for the surrounding state boundaries and go ahead and click on the symbol button. And this will bring me to my Format Polygon Symbol tool. And ArcGIS Pro is really powerful in this area compared to past versions of GIS software offered by Esri. And so what I have here is a solid stroke, which is the boundary, and a solid fill, which is the inside of all these surrounding shapes. And what I can do now is actually use a gradient fill in order to de-emphasize some of the boundary colors here. So I'm going to actually hide this so that I can see the tool's apply button down here. And so I've changed this to a gradient fill, and I go ahead and click apply, and it's going to take a little while to draw. But we see that these states, the boundaries are now kind of emphasized through a gradient fill, whereas Indiana's interior, which I'm going to do other things with later, is kind of left alone because the state boundaries are actually behind the data that I'm in the drawing order, the data that I'm going to be mapping. So this is one way that you can kind of change the emphasis of an area. You might actually want to change some of the color scheme situation here. And so we would kind of go here to our color properties and perhaps do a little bit of transparency increase, bring that up, maybe change the color or something in order to even further kind of put the surrounding states into, a little bit less of an emphasis. There are options too about what kind of gradient fill there could be. We have a buffered one selected now, but a linear fill would go from whatever angle you put in. We could do a rectangular fill just around the edges, but it's not going to follow the actual boundaries of the polygon. For the most part, your buffered gradient fill is going to be probably the most interesting. Or the most useful. We can flip the color scheme around so that the darker places are in the middle of the state. That can also be effective in some contexts, but perhaps not in this one. So anyway, that's one way that we can emphasize or de-emphasize features just using some background data and some new gradient fill capabilities.